Ashley Discusses, the weekly web show where I talk about comics and tell you to buy them or borrow them or skip them or do whatever it is that comic calls for. This episode we actually had a request by some fan out there to discuss. That is a book that I feel like flew all the way under the radar, so much so that I'm shocked anyone even asked for it. Material by Ales Kot and Will Tempest. Ales Kot at this point has really made a name for himself in the industry. Some key books being Wild Children, that he did with Riley Rossmo. He also did Changes, a rather popular book of his. So at this point, Ales Kot doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. Then we have Will Tempest, famous for doing some previous work with Ales Kot on Zero. He did a couple issues of that. But other than that, Will Tempest has done a few things, but nothing really to raise him up. So Will Tempest is the name to look out for, and we will get more into him a little bit later. Material is a book that follows 4 different stories. One being a professor at MIT who teaches about technology while at the same time despising it, but he has a complicated love-hate relationship with technology. Another being about a washed-up movie actress who's being elevated once again by an up-and-coming director. Then we have an African-American teenager facing some racial discrimination via the police. And finally, and this is the one that all the promotional material talked about, we have an ex-prisoner of Guantanamo Bay trying to readjust to life after the prison. Right off the bat, this book is sort of all over the place, and most likely by design. Ales Kot tends not to follow a typical narrative style when left to his own devices. We jump around from character to character to character. It's 2 pages per character, telling a snippet of their story, before moving on to the next one, and they're seemingly disjointed. There's no overarching theme here, at least not that I can decrypt. I'm sure that there is one, and I'm sure that it's a rather lofty one, because that's what Ales Kot likes to do. But when you just read it, when you read the pages, there's no real connecting, branching, overarching theme here, which makes for a rather breakneck pace of the book. When you're getting into a story, boom, you're moving on to the actress. When you're getting into the actress story, boom, you're learning about some kid in Chicago. And that can create a rather jarring experience for the reader if you're not prepared for that. In addition to that, at the bottom of every page, Ales Kot has some further reading for you. For the professor, it's usually books or important articles about the technology or just some of the themes that the professor is exploring. For the actress, it's usually a song to listen to or a movie to watch. And then for the African-American child, it's famous, or rather infamous, cases of people being abused by the system or the police. What's interesting to note is the Guantanamo Bay prisoner doesn't have any further reading at the bottom of the page. I'm sure that that's a stylistic choice by Kot, symbolizing something that I'm probably just not getting. And really that's one of the largest points about this book. Every story, every character, every moment is Ales Kot trying to explain an ideology to you. Whether it be the nature versus technology themes of the MIT professor, or the rather unsavory way that the Chicago Police Department dealt with a few cases. That can create a situation in which the reader is made uncomfortable by the situation or the text being thrown at them. I will also say this: Ales Kot has a tendency to tell, not show, with his ideology. That is, a majority of the things that you will be learning from this book are from a character talking to another character. The actions, the settings, these are placeholders. Honestly, it creates a situation in which I'm less invested in Ales Kot's ideology because he's not presenting it to me in a way that I find digestible. Not that I'm not understanding some of the things that he's laying out, but the presentation is lacking. And to be perfectly frank, Kot has a tendency to do that with a lot of books. Wild Children had that exact same issue, and that was dealing with matters completely unrelated to things that Material is dealing with. For those reasons, the writing is a bit of a mixed bag, and to be perfectly frank, that's always Ales Kot's style. Ales Kot has cemented himself as an author that covers certain things in a certain way. If you like it, jump on board the Kot train. If you don't, move on. I will move on, see what I did there, to the art, though. Will Tempest is a phenomenal artist, and Ales Kot has a tendency to team up with some of the best artists for the book that he's creating. Having Riley Rossmo on Wild Children was inspired, and Will Tempest is doing that job here and now on Material. The settings and the characters, while overly simplistic in the design, are fabulously crafted to be believable, to be anatomically correct in most instances, and to have colors that both pop, are muted, and portray things in a very realistic fashion. Will Tempest manages to create a book and some shapes that might seem difficult to work around because of the very serious nature of most of what Ales Kot is doing. But when it's all said and done, Tempest manages to keep up, and to be perfectly frank, most of the time I was continuing to read the book just to see what Tempest would do with those characters in those settings next. There are a few instances of extreme stylization, such as on the actress Nylon's facial features sometimes. Those are not necessarily always the greatest line work, but it's chosen to be that way, you can tell. In such a manner that it's meant to make you feel a bit uneased sometimes, I feel. And Tempest manages to capture those feelings phenomenally. All in all, Material is a bit of a mixed bag. You have Ales Kot's typical stylization of characters and ideologies mixing with some real situations in life. These are situations that do happen. And mixing with Will Tempest's phenomenal artwork. So, when it all combines, what's the final product like? If you want my honest opinion, and why else would you be here if you didn't want my honest opinion, I'm going to go ahead and give Material a borrow it. While I don't think that this book is buying Material as of right now, I feel like it has the potential to group together to create an overarching theme across these stories, across the books, that will make for an interesting read. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and say borrow it, and when it's all out, that's when we'll be able to make the final judgment for this. I will also say that if you're a fan of the art that Will Tempest is portraying and laying out there, the book might be worth a buy just to have that in physical form. Alright, true believers, so that's it for this episode. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, yada yada yada. Do the things with the thing, please. Remember to leave a comment about what you thought about this book. If you disagree, let me know. And if you want a specific book that you want me to review, leave it in the comments below. I mean, this one was made by a request, so just go ahead and lay it out there, and I'm sure I'll be happy to make that request for you. Until next time, we'll see you later, true believers.